It is Friday, August 8th. Brian, welcome to Friday. You ready for the weekend? You have a lot of chores, a lot of things going on this weekend?
Probably miscellaneous, chores, hopefully some downtime, but also, taking in the summer weekends because they're ticking down kind of quickly.
Here we are. We're already in the second week of August, August 8th.
How did that happen?
You just blink. We've been very busy. When you're busy, time seems to go a little quicker, doesn't it?
It sure does. A lot of activities, a lot of things over the summer, and hopefully many of you have had a chance to take some downtime. But also it's been a busy couple of weeks with weather. Obviously, a lot of folks are still dealing with storm cleanup and things that, just fall out from a lot of weather. And storms tonight, potentially. We're watching the weather today, and of course, that's one of our subjects we're going to be covering on this edition of Weather or Not.
Yeah, North Dakota had strong to severe weather throughout much of the night, throughout much of the state. We'll try to recap some of that and take a look at our forecast. Drought monitor, that's something we've kind of skipped on during KELOLAND this morning. We'll take a look at the latest drought monitor, the weekend forecast. Always like to talk about the pattern ahead as we'll go over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And I have a little segment in here, Brian. We haven't done much or not on whether or not.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to put together at least a little bit to talk about an or not segment.
I like it.
Okay, that will try to come up if we have time at the end. Otherwise, stay with us. We'll be right back on whether or not. Before we get to the outline of what happened last night to our north, let's talk about a forecast for today. This is Futurecast at 5 o'clock. Notice how it does have a couple of showers and thunderstorms into western South Dakota. We'll also have to watch northeastern KELOLAND as we can get a couple of developing storms here into northeastern South Dakota. Aberdeen could be one of those areas. As we go into the later part of the evening, notice how some of those storms are trying to grow. And the trend has been showing that things may refire as we go through the evening and early tonight in northeastern South Dakota. The question is, how far south do those storms extend as we get beyond sunset and into early tonight? If we do get a couple of thunderstorms to develop, you can see some of those trying to come in around maybe 10 o'clock this evening near Brookings to the east of Watertown into western Minnesota, but do they extend far enough to include Sioux Falls? So we may have a couple of evening thunderstorms in eastern South Dakota into the early part of the night, and they may become strong to severe. Then we'll have to watch southeastern South Dakota, probably late tonight toward daybreak tomorrow. We could see a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms in southeastern KELOLAND. Still at the slight risk for severe weather across eastern South Dakota and western Minnesota for today. But they had a lot of severe weather to our north, Brian, in North Dakota during the overnight hours. Numerous severe thunderstorm warnings as well as tornado warnings found across North Dakota last night.
Yeah, and yesterday at this time we were talking about the risk in North Dakota being quite a bit higher, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that South Dakota remaining capped, so putting a lid over most of the thunderstorms. And so you bottleneck all that energy up there, and sure enough, it did erupt here. It took a while, though. It was late. In fact, this is the radar coverage from last night, and you can see the progression. Now, you can see a couple of, actually, at this point on the radar, there's 3 individual line segments there, and all of them had severe weather as they marched in tandem with one another. And then they kind of coalesced together into one large squall, and right in the middle of the bow is where the tornado warning started to pop up. And, that's just downright messy and obviously kind of a dangerous scenario when you got tornado warnings in the middle of the night. They were dealing with that cell that actually plowed right into Grand Forks, came through with 90-mile-an-hour wind. That says enough right there. I mean, we know what 90-mile-an-hour winds will do. And essentially, our coverage area, we had kind of just the back end of the squall into Aberdeen. Aberdeen gusted about 60 at about 4:30 during the early morning. The Weather Service put out a few warnings on that, but then they dropped those because the wind outflow just didn't really sustain itself too much, which was thankfully good. We just didn't need any more, wind on top of what we've had. And then the rest of the activity for the balance of the morning, basically just riding up and over the cap in eastern South Dakota, and even some of that out West River too. kind of watching just some general rain. So that was basically the setup from earlier today. Now, as you mentioned, Scott, now the question is, what do we do with the rest of the forecast for later today, and of course going into the overnight period? And one thing that leads into this is the instability in the weather. We've got a lot of heat, a lot of humidity this afternoon. We're tracking numerous heat advisories out there for southeastern KELOLAND. Obviously, that's a story that has come, back and forth this summer a few different times. And it's one factor that leads into the potential for storms. Obviously, the biggest factor, or one of the biggest factors, is the cap over top of all of this extreme instability. And this is actually, I want to pause it right here. This is the weather map this evening. Look at all that gray and charcoal color. I mean, you're right there on your legend at the top end of the scale. You really couldn't bottle up any more instability. But it's just like a whole pile of dynamite. If there's no spark, or if it doesn't really, have much to ignite that, stays there, doesn't do much, does it? But
there's a big contrast. You go from Sioux Falls to maybe the James River Valley, and then the instability quickly goes down.
It does.
And that's that front that's trying to move across eastern and southeastern KELOLAND. And, with these fronts, it helps give us some lift in the atmosphere. We'll see if we do get a couple of those evening thunderstorms in eastern South Dakota. And if we do, Brian, they can quickly become strong to severe.
Right. There's no question that if they did, and that's why we call this a conditional threat of severe weather. It has, in a case like this, you've got to see more evidence to support, are we going to be able to overcome that cap? And it can happen. You and I have worked so many events over the years where we've seen this tilt. It can go either way. It could be a pretty quiet night. We could be looking at some storms up in maybe Fargo. Maybe that's where it blows up and then kind of cascades down into central Minnesota. Sometimes what will happen, too, on an event like that, if you get the front to come through at the surface, you don't get any storms, then you kind of wait and hang back overnight late, and you'll see a patch of rain that'll come up out of Nebraska. And sometimes that's nature's way of sort of kind of reaching some equilibrium a little bit. So it didn't necessarily result in a toxic line of storms, but you could still get some development late in the night. But again, that's a scenario. It's not the scenario. It's one of a couple, actually 2 or 3 different ways this can pan out. So bottom line, stay up on the weather this evening. Just go about your activities. If you're going to the fair, you're doing whatever it might be, just have your Storm Tracker app ready to go in case some things pop up. And especially if you're north of Sioux Falls, Brookings, 9, 10 o'clock, maybe Watertown, and you go north, you'll just be able to kind of follow that. And then hopefully we can put severe weather aside for a while.
For the weekend, I think
Yes.
we will. But you mentioned 8, 9 o'clock that, the day part for a lot of us will end up being dry. It's when we get towards sunset and after, that's when we do have the better chances for showers and thunderstorms. We haven't talked about the drought monitor. The latest drought monitor, of course, came out yesterday. It's something we kind of skipped over on yesterday and even this morning. So let's go ahead and check that right now. And, I looked at this behind the scenes, and it hasn't changed much. Okay, we continue with the severe drought near Chamberlain and areas to the north, and I know that they have been receiving at least some rainfall over the past week. We'll get to a weekly rain total coming up. And we also have this area here in the southwestern South Dakota where they've had some fire dangers from time to time this past week, and they continue with a moderate drought category there into Custer County. So, of course, we could still use some of the rainfall. Now, these are just estimates of what we had over the past week. We've had some showers, thunderstorms, of course, move through. It looks like eastern South Dakota, from just the numbers that you see there, they range anywhere from 1 inch to maybe 3 inches. That's a good average. Of course, where you do have some of the higher colors there in purple, that's heavier rainfall to the north and northwest of Huron. But again, that area there in the central to central South Dakota, you see Pierre's number coming in at about 1/4. Near Chamberlain says 1.25 inches, so they have been seeing some rainfall into that location. And then you can notice how these numbers do taper off as you work your way from Kadoka to Martin in the southwestern South Dakota. It's been a lot of hit and miss work there when it comes to rainfall over the past week. So we'll continue to look for these chances of rain, Brian, but when you look at the 7-day forecast, you could always check that online at KELOLAND.com. We have our thunderstorm chances, of course, later today, tonight, maybe extending into tomorrow morning. And then we'll have a dry period for a while until we hit the end of that 7-day forecast. And that's when these temperatures are expected to warm again to the 90s and get those dew point temperatures to the 70s. When we look at the monthly precipitation, again, we're only a week into the month. Mitchell about 1.5 inches, inch and a third in Huron, close to 1 inch in Sioux Falls. You see 1.5 inches in Phillips. So it has been hit and miss, while Pine Ridge coming in at just 0.02 in Valentine, just shy of 1/10 of an inch. Now, when you compare that to average, you can see, of course, we're well above from Aberdeen. We know about Watertown. Watertown's been more or less the epicenter of getting a lot of this heavy rain, and for areas around Watertown, such as maybe Millbank, Clear Lake, we're talking areas of Castlewood as well, getting a lot of heavy rainfall throughout much of this summer. So when we compare things to average, we're close to 2 inches above in Watertown, but we're below in Winter, Valentine, and Pine Ridge, close to average for the first week in Rapid City, and the same holds true for Sioux Falls at around 1/10 of an inch above average. This coming weekend, we are looking at the chance for rain mainly in the morning for tomorrow, and then it looks like dry skies and more comfortable air. We'll talk more about that coming up. Welcome back to Weather or Not. I'm meteorologist Scott Mundt. Of course, joining me is meteorologist Brian Karstens. The weekend's just about here. We have heat and humidity today, but that will soon change for this coming weekend. But it also come with a chance at a couple of scattered storms, so we'll have to watch that as that cooler, drier air comes in.
Yeah, so that's how we kind of start here on Saturday morning. But the one piece of news that I think is big is the, among other things, is the lack of or the decreasing humidity going into Saturday. And I'll be very curious to see how much this actually drops. There have been some behind-the-scenes indicators, Scott, that I was just looking at here, suggesting dew points could drop into the 40s and 50s, not just 50s. So that would be...
We're not talking Sioux Falls.
No, but even some of the short-term modeling is trying to put that out for Brookings.
Okay.
And there's some other evidence, and I'll be fine with something in the 50s. It's going to feel much better compared to what this afternoon will be. But you've got some things here on the maps here to talk about. For
you may have noticed that some morning precipitation across southeastern South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. That's early in the day. After that, we'll have a decrease in cloud cover. I think much of the day will end up being dry. Temperatures will warm. We'll have our numbers 70s, 80s. We may be stuck in the 70s in parts of northeastern South Dakota. Otherwise, expect widespread 80s for Saturday. We mentioned how the dew point temperatures are expected to fall. The air will start to feel a little drier. Here's what we have going on for Sunday. Probably start dry as we go through the day on Sunday. Temperatures will warm. Numbers do return to the 70s. 80s for afternoon highs. We'll see if something develops here across western South Dakota. The European model's trying to develop a scattered shower or thunderstorm mainly into the hills of western South Dakota. But I think the main takeaway, Brian, is as we get into this weekend, temperatures will be, we'll say seasonal, numbers in the 80s, low to middle 80s. That's our climate average now throughout much of eastern South Dakota. Keep in mind, too, we're losing about 2.5 minutes of daylight. Climate average continues to fall.
Exactly, yeah.
Have you noticed that at night?
I have, and that's not always a bad thing when you have to get to bed early anyway.
I know, that's
the
what
morning
I like.
show. Well, you and I are kind of we have to get up a little earlier than probably most folks do. But one thing about that pattern, too, is we go into the weekend. Obviously, we're still fairly stabilized into early next week. But you're going to talk about the pattern, and I think this segment's really interesting because we have now noticed a little more of a gap in between storms for early next week. So we might be able to run this thing out for a period of time where we won't be talking about severe weather.
No, we won't. And there's an interesting piece that's trying to come in off the eastern United States as this graphic continues to loop. See that? And this is something that you pointed out yesterday, but though the placement of that was a little different, wasn't it? I think it was a little bit farther south. So looks like things may be waking up or just starting in the tropics. And, typically getting into August, you do start to see at least some of that. And I believe it peaks once we get into September. So, that's nothing that's unusual. Here's our pattern. High pressure to our south. We have that area of low pressure into Canada. That will continue to move to the east. That's helping to bring in the drier and cooler air as we get into this coming weekend. I highlighted this here, this area of low pressure in Missouri. This is Tuesday of next week. Interested to see. Right now, we do have a dry forecast going. Interested to see if we have enough moisture available and the exact track of this, if this continues to show up, to see if we do have to add maybe a shower, thunderstorm in the forecast for the early part of next week. So that'll be a feature we'll watch. Right now, we do have dry skies. And then dry skies may last throughout the week until we hit maybe the tail end of the week. We'll increase our temperatures. We'll increase the amount of humidity or the dew point temperature probably back to the 70s late next week and going into next weekend. And then here's a look at what you can expect as we hit that third week of August. We'll see what happens here off the eastern coast of the United States if this holds true, the exact position of that as we do get into that third week of August, because that could slow our weather down. Very interested to see if that happens. It can really slow things down for us. So if we start to warm and get into a dry pattern, we'll see if that sticks around for a while.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some tendencies for our weather forecast to be affected by some of those wild cards on the East Coast. I'll be curious too, and I haven't really made we haven't made a final call on this, but that second half of the month, if we start getting more evidence of some hotter weather trying to build in, and one thing, Scott, on my graphics machine here,
Sure.
I did want to show maybe just a little illustration of this. This is kind of a similar map to what you showed, but this is what we call the ensemble weight of the AI version of the European model. Now, this is really interesting product because it is pretty brand new. This is late breaking stuff for modeling. And what this is doing is it's taking artificial intelligence modeling, which is an entirely different approach to weather forecasting. It looks backwards in time and it looks at historical patterns, and then it tries to project forward what's going to happen. But it's a map that's weighted with an ensemble. So it's a whole collection of things that is designed to give meteorologists a better predictor on patterns. So I'm going to just put this out here, that what you just talked about, I noticed you talked about next Tuesday, that wave down in Missouri, and you can see some of that troughing right here in the midsection of the country. So, up to that point, that probably keeps some of our temperatures, not over the top. But then what do we see here? You get into late next week, and troughing in the northwest, that's coming in there. And then, watching beyond that, look at all this ridging across.
It could be a lot of heat.
Yeah, there's definitely, and when it comes to a 2-week forecast, it's something that I would say, okay, let's acknowledge that. I think that might be our first little inkling that something, a broader ridge pattern to end the summer. Of course, when you got all that broad area of high pressure draped across the United States, it can allow those tropical systems to sneak underneath that. So that's something that, we can't really predict with a good amount of certainty yet on an individual storm or storm track, but the pattern seems conducive, and then we would be kind of in this area where it might be a little harder at times to get those ridge riders. I don't know that that's certainly not a lock yet, but it tells me that there's summer weather yet ahead. And the fact of the matter is we got so much moisture now for some of us that have been getting rain that we're going to get some humidity too. So,
oh yeah, such as what we've had yesterday and today, and we'll get at that nice break as we do get into this coming weekend. Let's get into the or not. I need to go ahead and change the graphics again. Oh, I've got one step ahead of me. I was trying to make that a surprise for you with one, my goofy graphics that I like to make. So here we go in the or not factor of whether or not. So yeah, you already got a sneak preview of that. It's out by the garden, able to pick some peppers, Brian. And my goodness, the peppers are doing fantastic. So I had a lot of jalapenos. And what I ended up doing with this is I jarred them yesterday. So I was able to, and I did some earlier already this year. The peppers are going great. I should have taken a picture of the actual garden, but I didn't. The tomatoes, I think they need to play catch up a little bit. No pun intended.
Yep.
But they are looking a little behind compared to this is the best year I've had for peppers.
Yeah, yeah. And the quality looks great. I'm sure as you can and do all your things with those, that'll be fun to work on that as a project. And then you say you got the tomatoes going pretty good, except they're a little behind.
They seem to be a little behind. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of tomatoes too that are green and growing. I've got a few red ones. The cherries are in, or they're starting to come in little by little. Couple good bell peppers, a lot of good sweet corn, just about ready to pick. We've got 6 rows. Now, of course, I deal with a garden that's about 80, 90 feet long, and it's about 30 feet wide. And what we do
Take up my backyard.
is we put like a little bit of everything. There's pumpkins, there's watermelon, there are the green beans, the bush beans. Love those. The green beans are doing great. That's one of our biggest things. Pea crop didn't work out so well. I just let the weeds get too wrangled in there. So we actually planted peas about 4 or 5 days ago for a fall crop.
I should do that.
And I like doing that because I think with peas, for us, it just works way better to do some of that. Radish, too, I do as a fall crop with the girls. They like to come out and help on that. The rest of the garden is kind of a mishmash of, we got a few other things, some sweet potatoes, a couple of those. So, yeah, I'll do some busy work and take some pictures, Scott.
Yeah, I should do this. I should have done that. How's your watermelon? I have 4 watermelon coming in.
We have a grapevine. I have 1 plant in there, and there's one pretty good-sized watermelon in there.
Okay.
I was kind of looking around for another one. I didn't see one yesterday. I'll have to look a little closer maybe this weekend. But that's kind of fun. And we did plant some extra cucumber, too. That's another thing. At my house, the second we get a cucumber in the house, it's gone.
Really?
Because my girls will we just chop them up, and they love them. They will just eat them. And
well, that's good.
it's great snacks and great healthy food. Gardening is a great hobby because it's healthy for you, and it's good therapy when you're just out in the open, out in the air. You're kind of digging in the dirt.
Oh, yeah.
And we're pretty fortunate. We didn't really have too much storm damage with that wind. Our garden is kind of sheltered, so everything kind of withstood that. But you always kind of, take your blessings and hope for the best, and we'll see what the weather brings the rest of the month.
So we have some homework to do. We have to take pictures of our garden.
That's right. That's going to be our assignment for the weekend, Scott.
Okay, that's an easy one to do. That's our latest edition of Whether or Not. Thank you for joining us.